young adult and teenage activities in the parish. In the first probably 20 or so years of the parish, many more teenagers worked, some of them, both boys and girls, not even finishing high school before they got a full-time job. And there were no what we would think of as young adults programs at the time, but a lot of activities for these teenagers. There was a Young Men's Society and the Girls Friendly Society. And the Girls Friendly Society, I checked up on. It's an organization throughout the church and was originally intended for young working girls, and now it's just supportive of girls and women on a more broad basis. They would give shows at the church and raise money for the parish. They gave a show in 1903, and the receipts paid for redoing the floor in the basement. And in 1907, the church was in bad financial shape, couldn't pay its mortgage, and the show paid off the $225 due on that. The shows were not ones that we would approve of these days because they were minstrel shows with blackface. But in those days, that wasn't seen as a terrible thing. By the 1910s, the boys' groups, it was apparently quite popular to focus on themes related to chivalry and knighthood, and they had two different programs, afternoon and evening, for boys. And in about 1913 or 14, these were the days when new dances were becoming popular, and some of them were considered very shocking, and some churches would have nothing to do with them. But St. Chrysostom started a dance class for young people, and they gave a New Year's Eve dance, which was written up a few days before in the Tribune. Church to have cabaret, St. Chrysostom's to have girls, tango, and frappe on New Year's Eve, chaperones on guard. And they invited all the parishioners to it, and it apparently was successful because they had it for 2 more years, but then stopped probably because of World War I. They didn't have a New Year's dance in 1917, but the parish had a Thanksgiving dance for Great Lakes naval recruits. The first real young adults group started in 1922. It was called the Tuesday Nighters after the night that they met, and they had a weekly dinner. Average attendance 37, it was noted in 1924. They sponsored a dance at the 1922 Bazaar, and they gave various programs. In 1927, when the carillon was to be installed, they got an eminent authority on carillons to speak on that. One subgroup of this that was very active was a drama group called the Cloister Mummers. And they went every year and put on a play at the parish camp in Michigan. And they also would give performances at area clubs and hospitals. And our organist at this time, Harold Simons, won an award in a Chicago Drama League event when the group took part in it for voice and diction. By the 1930s and the Depression, the Cloister Mummers apparently were a Depression casualty, and activities were quieter, and they had chamber music and bridge groups. In 1933, they founded a group called Delta Kappa Phi, which was apparently a diocesan organization for young people 16 to 21. and they'd meet on Sunday evenings for fellowship and service. Then a young adults group was reestablished in 1936, and they also came to the Sunday evening service, which was at that time at 8 p.m. There were hymns and a short sermon, and they started a volunteer choir for that service, which became a very important part of the parish ministry for the next 20 years or so. They planned a club for young marrieds, but this apparently never got started. Many of the young men in the parish were, of course, serving in World War II, and so non-war related activities for young people, there wasn't much of anything at that period. But in 1946, they started a young people's group again under the assistant at that time, Cuthbert Pratt. He was also studying for a doctor's degree at the University of Chicago and apparently had contacts there, and some of the speakers sound very abstruse. The patriarch of the Assyrian Church came to speak in 1946. They'd have book reviews and musical programs, and some of the group went once a week and for bowling. And one of the members of this group became an ordained minister a few years later. The age limit wasn't really rigid, and there were some older people in the group. And by the late 1950s, the group had kind of aged out, and there weren't many young people at all in it, so they started a group called the Theophilus Club, after the person that Luke addresses at the beginning of his Gospel in Acts. And this club had several special areas of interest. The one that was the most notable was the music and drama group. Our assistant at that time, Charles Summers, was married to a woman who had a degree in music, and she was the conductor when the group gave Gilbert and Sullivan performances, and Summers himself would do the patter roles like Coco in the Mikado. In 1959, when Robert Hall had been at St. Chrysostom's about a year as rector, a new young adults group was formed called the Seabury Forum. There was feeling among a lot of the parish groups, the Ushers Guild and the Women's Guild among them, that new members weren't really that warmly welcomed, and this group was designed to change this focus. And they'd meet every Sunday evening and have supper and discussion, and they scheduled some special events, including in fall 1963 a program on sex and the single adult. It was mostly singles, and the group was really the victim of its own success because so many people, members of the group, married and then would immediately move to the suburbs that there's no reference to it after 1963. A new group started called the Chris Swingers in 1965, and it continued on for 4 or 5 years. And it, according to one of its annual reports, considered itself not a religious organization as such, but hoped to create something that gives substance to the lives of the young adults in the area. And their topics sound very 60s. Playboy philosophy in the church, speaker who was a minister to the hippie community, abortion in the pluralistic society, the death of God theology. And they'd play volleyball in the gym and would sell refreshments at the Dearborn Garden Walk. By 1970, they had abandoned the name Chris Swingers and just called themselves the Young Adults. And that year there was a skiing trip. A new assistant, the Reverend John Haas, came to St. Chrysostom's in June 1971, and he had special responsibility for the group. And he totally changed the focus. It was described basic spiritual focus, and they hoped to do service to the parish and community and to provide fellowship. They sponsored several blood drives. They'd have an annual retreat at DeKoven Foundation in Wisconsin, and every Sunday evening they'd meet for evening prayer, dinner, and programs or work on various projects. They started having house Eucharists in 1972 during Lent, and these became very popular and later were open to everybody in the parish. Older parishioners were not excluded. There was a woman in the congregation, Lee Johnston, who was by that time in her 80s and had retired. She had been the principal at a school for the blind and retired and moved to live with her daughter Jessie, who was living in Chicago and had for many years attended St. Chrysostom's. Jessie traveled on her job and often would leave on Sunday nights. And when she wasn't around on Sunday nights, Lee would come and join the Young Adults. And once they went out to dinner at a restaurant that was lit by gas, and she told the group, she said, well, I have the edge on you here because I've been to gaslight restaurants before. The medieval festival was the group's major activity, and they held it first in 1972. It began with evensong in church in medieval style, and then there would be a morality play in the church, after which the group would process to the guild room for a 5-course authentic medieval meal with no utensils, and generous servings of mead and wine, and the evening would end with a toast to the saints in alphabetical order. And with the amount of mead and wine that was served, I don't think they ever got anywhere near Z. This continued 2 evenings in 1973 and 4 in 1974, and was revived in 1987 to celebrate Bob Howell's 20th anniversary as rector and Bishop Montgomery's 25 years as bishop in the diocese. And in 1990, in December, they had the medieval festival as Bob Howell's farewell banquet. Some of the members of that group are still in the parish, including Mary Ellen Christie and Judy Bross, and 2 women from the group went on and were ordained. Janice Gordon, one of the 2, was ordained to the diaconate here at St. Chrysostom's. Reverend Joseph Kerr, who was Haas's successor, replaced the medieval festival with a Victorian Christmas party, but left, I think he stayed only about a year and a half. And by 1976, the group was known as the Koinonia Fellowship, and the group was now including older members, and in 1981 they changed their name to the Adult Fellowship and just had the programs that would be of interest to anyone of the group. Early 1980s programs, a preppy look party to start the 1981 and 82 season, and stress and burnout, understanding your aging parents. And a member of the group who was an oncologist gave a program called News from the Cancer Front. And I particularly remember this because one of my aunts had died of cancer, and they had given her she'd been on a test for a cancer drug, and it had not worked for her, but this woman told about how it was used for other types of cancer, and I asked her about it because I was pleased to know that it had had some benefit to other people, if not my aunt. The end of the year, they always had a Mexican party, usually at someone's home who had a party room or an outdoor area where it could be, they could have it. And we have not had a formal organization since that time, but we have on occasion, the various assistants have invited groups from the 20s and 30s to go out to brunch after church, things like this. I think some activities sometimes go to Grant Park in the summer for the music.